I made it a mission to try to defeat Christian theology. So we started to do a lot of methamphetamines. A psychologist would later tell me it was an acute psychotic episode.
I'm curious to know, is God using that somehow?
Almost like God had the grace and the knowledge to give me this restart.
And now you being in full-time ministry, hearing the voice of the Lord where he's like, hey, follow me and I'll show you a life you could not have imagined. Welcome to Grace and the Gravity. This is the podcast where pastors you don't know from churches you don't attend tell true stories of good news from right here on planet Earth. My name is Tim, and it is my privilege today to sit down and have a conversation with my friend Joe. Joe is a pastor. Joe is a level 2 CrossFit coach. Joe is a father and a husband. Joe is a former inmate in the Florida Correctional Center, and that's going to be part of his story today. So glad to have you here with us. Joe, how are you coming in today?
I'm coming in well, Tim. You know, it's always busy. You know, I feel like that's just the reality of life. You know, I got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, married, pastor, CrossFit. You know, the needs are never met fully. However, I'm happy I can carve out this time and be present.
Yeah, you know, I'm really glad to have you here with us, man. And just for the record, where are you coming at us from today? Because this is a new one for us. I
am sitting on a boat in Key Largo, Florida.
So your presence in Florida is going to play a pretty a vital role in kind of telling the story that you've got to share today. So you live now full time in Florida, the Florida Keys, right?
I do full time. Yep, for the last 13 years. So
I know that that's where your story has brought you, but I also know that's not where it started. We're both California natives, if I remember correctly. Joe, Phyllis, just kind of start us with where your story begins, man. I mean, it ultimately culminates with you being in full-time ministry, but it started somewhere very, very different.
My journey began in Riverside, California, you know, probably not too far from where you're at right now. Grew up in I try to say this politely, but it was an agnostic household. My mom was a believer in Jesus, but hadn't quite developed the lifestyle. And my dad, kind of opposite. You know, he's just not there yet. He's not a big idea of an imaginary friend in the sky. And so it naturally, growing up, that was kind of the position that I held fast to. That anything that involved religion was fantasy. You know, and Tim, I shared this with you that there was a documentary that came out called Religulous.
Bill Maher.
Related to it. Yeah, I related to it so much as I downloaded it back when the iPhone had the ability to download movies. That was the first movie I bought. And I kept that with me everywhere I went. Yeah, because I wanted to use it as a reference guide when I got into arguments or debates with Christians at bars and other things.
Yeah, so some people download the Bible app. You downloaded Bill Maher's Religulous.
Really, yeah, exactly. and I made it a mission to try to defeat the Christian theology in youth my age. You know, people that were similar to me, girls, guys, didn't matter. I loved to argue. I just had an infinity about it. It just made me so happy to watch people question their belief.
But where did that hostility towards the Christian faith kind of come from for you?
My dad grew up in a Catholic, kind of, I guess in the 60s, 70s, that Catholic school upbringing where, you know, he tells stories. And again, I don't know, I wasn't there, but he tells stories where how the staff or the nuns would actually hit the kids. As me being a natural defender of people, I stood alongside my dad and wanted to defend that position that he held.
Man, that's interesting, dude, because a lot of times you hear of people taking an oppositional stance towards faith as almost a rebellion from their parents. But it sounds like for you, it was almost more of like in order to be in alignment with your dad, that there was like I don't know, like a unity there for you and him.
Going back to that religious thing that we just talked about, him and I saw it in theaters together.
Oh, no kidding. Wow. That's man, that's something for it. How old were you when your dad took you to see that?
Man, I must have been 14 maybe when it came out.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a pretty formative...
20 years ago.
Yeah. And so that had a formative impact on you, it sounds like. And then growing up in Riverside, so I'm guessing you were not involved in church or in any kind of religious community or anything. What was your kind of youth like?
So just after high school, I acquired a fake ID from a friend of mine. I was Anthony Perez for quite a while.
I always heard about fake IDs, and I was like, is that a real thing? Like, people actually get fake IDs?
So listen, it wasn't like a manufactured fake ID. It was just a guy that somewhat looked like me if you squinted really hard and didn't look at the name.
Oh, so it was a real ID.
It was a 100% real ID. Okay. Yeah. And I paid him some money to take it. And
wow.
What I did with that ID is, if you have an open refrigerator filled with alcohol and you're underage, you can attract any friend that you want, at least in that circle of group of people that I was looking for. And so I quickly went from what I felt like was the outcast to the popular.
Oh, wow. Because you were the alcohol provider.
I was the alcohol provider. And if you can imagine, that had an incredible shape on my identity. I really began to pursue that, because the more crazy I got, or the more fun I could have, the more friends I felt like I was building. And so we built what I would consider just a party gang.
So at this point, you're in Riverside, so I'm guessing you're 18, 19, around there, and you're starting to you've already kind of decided God's not for me. He doesn't even exist. It's ridiculous. But man, the party scene seems to really be my sweet spot. Evidently that was working for you in some regard, because you were making friends and stuff like that.
Well, Tim, that's the problem, because it works so well, at least in my little mind's eye, that it didn't stop with alcohol. I continued to pursue all sorts of different drugs, from cocaine to, I never injected anything, but we did dabble in heroin, and then the psychedelics became very popular, the LSD and the mushrooms. And so that continued on until about 23 years old. And it didn't take too long for the administration of where I was working at. I was a security officer at a security guard. I had no gun. I was an unarmed security guard. It didn't take long for them to begin catching on and smelling me in the mornings. And so I ended up being pulled aside for an alcohol test at work. And
now you just mentioned your security. What were you working at, a mall?
So it was a casino. I think they renamed it. You would have to tell me the new name of it, but it was San Manuel Indian Casino.
Hey, I'm a Christian, dude. I don't know the names of casinos. I don't know. No.
You hear it on the radio. I know you do. Yeah, I feel like I thought they changed the name, but anyway, it was a fun place to work. It really was. I got the coolest job there. I was the security guard for the dirt bike track. And I bet you had no idea they had a dirt bike track. But
it was for the
It was for the reservation.
Wow.
And so they gave me a Yamaha Rhino. Have you ever seen one of those 4-wheel golf carts?
Okay.
And that was my patrol vehicle. And my job was to make sure nobody was on the track that wasn't registered.
So I have to ask, how much air can a Yamaha Rhino catch?
Enough. I was clearing 8 foot, no problem. We actually had one of our guys. He rolled it down the hill one time.
No.
And they caught it on camera, and it was so obvious. And then They started to look at us. Up until that point, we were almost non-existent. And once that happened, all of a sudden, eyes kind of started to turn towards us, and that was kind of the end of our fun up there.
Yeah, so in addition to that, you're coming into work hungover.
I had no ambitions. I had no goals. I had nothing but the weekends to live for. And like I said, it caught up to me. They ended up blow testing me one day at work. They have a zero tolerance there because you're driving vehicles, their vehicles. And it was this weird 3-week span where I'd lost that job. I fought for unemployment. Obviously, they didn't give it to me. And I had to make a decision what I was going to do. And my dad retired out in the Florida Keys. He was a truck driver. And I just kind of game planned. I said, if I just sold everything I had here in California and drove to the Florida Keys, I could start over. And naturally, I wanted to start over and try to change my life because I started to hang out with these kids that got into a lot of meth. And so we started to do a lot of methamphetamines. I was finding myself, pulling multiple days up. And looking back on it now, I know it was God, but I knew that the path I was heading on, I wasn't going to make it much longer.
So yeah, you could
out and
you could sense that you were headed in a dangerous direction. So it's like, okay, my dad's in Florida. I'm just going to book it to Florida.
And so I did, man. I loaded up at the time I had a Ford Fiesta, little tiny car. It was a relatively new car. It still had paper tags on it. I hadn't even made my first payment. And I drove that car with no registration and no license plate across all those states, all 50 hours to get here. I never got pulled over. The amount of divine grace, at the time I considered it luck I had was unbelievable. Yeah, I landed in Florida with $12 in my pocket. And I got to work. I just got to work out here. I've got a drug problem. At the time, I had a painkiller addiction. So when I left California, that was mostly what I spent the rest of my money on to get here. Is I put gas in my car and grabbed a bunch of painkillers. And I'm on Craigslist looking for jobs. And I found what I thought was the best job that's ever been conceived by humanity. It was a wave runner tour guide.
That sounds like the Florida equivalent of what you were doing in California. In California, you're riding on a dirt track, dirt bikes and stuff like that. And now you're in Florida.
I had developed a set of skills. I had developed a set of skills in California. I could do this. And I started doing it. I started just simply, running gas out. Didn't take long before I got promoted. Became their number one tour guide. Because remember, I told you that my hope was to kind of come out here and start over. I found a way that I could drink, do my drugs, and work. And the interesting part about it was that's just how things are out here.
Oh, so it's just like no one's going to give you the smell test? No one gave me the smell test. No. Hey, man, just keep it hidden. Don't worry about it. I had a manager who used to keep the cooler stock for me for in between my tours, so I didn't have to go out and buy anything on my lunch break because I had to get back on them. Yeah. So your hope was to move out to Florida to potentially get clean, get your life together, and you end up with this job where they're like, "Hey, buddy, drink all you want. Like, just keep coming to work." Correct. Okay. So yeah, what happens there? I mean, how long can you keep that up for?
About 7 months. About 7 months. I used to joke. I was like, I don't need water. There's water in beer, and so I would. I went really hard. But in the Florida Keys, we're seasonal, and so when the season ends, the tourism stops. The customers stop coming, and things dry up. When I say dry up, your wallet, your money. If you're in a service industry, if you don't prepare for that, you're in trouble. Well,
were you the kind of guy who would set aside a percentage of his check?
Yeah, I was going to say, do I sound like the kind of guy that got here with $12 in his pocket? My money management skill at the time was if I didn't go into the negative, I was good. So if I had 3 cents in my account by the time the paycheck landed, I was the money man.
Yeah, you're cruising.
And I spent every dollar I had. And I made a lot of money tour guiding, but I spent it as fast as I had it. I remember I had so much loose cash in my car, 5s, 10s. I remember opening up my car door one time and a bunch of it blew out. And I said, don't worry about it. I just, in my mind, I just didn't care about nothing.
So, dude, I got a question for you. Like, you're living this lifestyle Is there any part of you at that point that's like, this is not sustainable? Or is it just like, dude, I'm doing this until I'm 80?
I said, and I spoke out loud, that I had died and gone to heaven.
So in your mind, this was, you could just do this forever.
Forever. There was no brakes, all gas. But going back to the dry season, what ended up happening was I hit my first dry season. I got no money. And so in order to maintain or try to maintain the high, things got forgotten, like the car payment and rent and anything else that I was sort of responsible for. I just kind of off to the wayside, and I couldn't afford the painkillers any longer. So instead I switched to Adderall. You know, okay. I found a kid who had a legitimate need for it, but he sold his pills for cheap. And so I switched my 3-4 painkiller a day habit to Adderalls. And if you know anything about that in the brain chemistry, it's like a methamphetamine also. So you see the trajectory of my journey, right? Back to the meth.
Yeah.
Up all night, no sleep during the day, running hard, drinking, smoking weed, whatever I could do to maintain this high. What ended up happening was I entered into what the psychologist would later tell me it was an acute psychotic episode where I lost the sense of reality. You ever seen The Truman Show?
Yeah.
Okay. In that Truman Show, you know, he starts to realize, like, you know, he's all in a simulation. Well, I started to get that feeling. Like everything was a simulation. You know, it was all this big joke, and I started to tell people I was the second coming of Christ. I could walk on water. I could do all these,
so this would kind of be your first religious experience, is that you are Jesus.
Right. Yep. And I share this, you know, as my loving sister. One day, you know, I'm telling people I can walk on water. She walks over and shoves me into the canal.
And could you?
I could not walk on water.
Okay.
I'm sure I justified it too. I wasn't ready.
Wow.
And so I just went out, man. I went out in my car one night. I acted a buffoon. I ended up knocking the tire off my vehicle, and I'm driving with this flat. And again, I'm in my mind, I'm thinking it's all fake. You know, as weird as that sounds, it was all fake. I'm in this weird reality state. I remember I didn't even pull the car over. I just stopped in the middle of the highway and just sat there. And the cops showed up. And they didn't arrest me. They asked me if everything all right. I said, obviously not, officer. I'm missing the front tire, you know. And they went out and looked, saw it. And instead of hauling me in that night, they pushed my car off to the side of the road and left me there until the morning. Yeah, but the irony to that was I hadn't been drinking. You know, I think they were hoping they could catch me with a, you know, smell of alcohol or something. But I'd gone so far beyond mentally what alcohol could do. I didn't need it any longer. I'd been up for 4 or 5 days. I was pretty messed up at that point. And long story short, the next morning I ended up going to a bar that I was kicked out of. And so they called the cops, and the police officer went to arrest me. And instead of listening to the police officer, what I did was I don't know how to quite explain this. He had one hand behind my back. And what happened was that hand went from behind my back to above my head. And I reached up and I felt the inside of a mouth. And when I pulled my finger back out, they, you know, got both hands behind my back, arrested me, and put me in the back of the car. I had accidentally cut the inside of the police officer's mouth with my nail.
Hey, we'll get right back to the episode, but I wanted to speak briefly to the pastors, the church planners, and the ministry leaders who might be listening. If you're out there, the Activated team exists for you. If you're leading in a church or ministry setting, we want to connect with you. We have a team of coaches, spiritual directors, and trainers, as well as workshops and retreats that we host for people just like you. Our heart is to support you because we know that well-loved leaders lead healthy churches and ministries, and we think that's a good thing. Click the link in the description below to let us know a little bit more about who you are and how we can serve you, and let us love you the way that you love the people you serve. Let's get back to the episode.
So they arrested me for battery on law enforcement officer and resisting with violence. Yeah, I got 2 felonies on that arrest. Yeah.
For that's a very technical. Okay, so, well, hang on now. I'm curious to know, is God using that somehow? Because that seems like a real bizarre way to get 2 felonies.
Yeah, it was 2 felonies. I'm locked up in, Tim, I was so messed up.
Dude, so do you still remember, like...
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay, so you're cognizant enough to be able to like look back and go,
oh, yeah.
I remember where my head was at.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All of it.
Man, that must be a bizarre experience because, yeah, I mean, I've only experienced you as like totally present and like easy to talk to, friendly and kind and patient. Like the idea that was who you who you were at that time. It just feels like
bad, dude.
Yeah, it feels almost impossible, but I believe you, because you lived it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so in jail, and then
I go down to the booking cell. I'm sorry, they ship me down to Key West because that's where they send the crazies. I get down there, they intake me, and the lady, I remember she looks at me and she goes, "You're not mad. You're just a really angry young man," is what she told me, and it stuck with me, man. It stuck with me like I just couldn't shake it.
What was it about that comment that like pierced you?
Because I saw myself as Party Joe. I saw myself as the happy-go-lucky. I saw myself as always pursuing fun. I never once even heard somebody tell me I was an angry person.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe she tapped into something that...
she did. She did.
Went unacknowledged.
She did. I couldn't tell you what she looks like. I couldn't tell you nothing. I just remember that. After about 4 days, I had finally calmed down a bit, and they brought me up into general population. And so I'm inside of the county jail here in Monroe County, and it's just a big room with bunk beds. That's all it is. 45 bunk beds, all steel, zero comfort. It was interesting. And so I ran around like an idiot for I don't know, about 15 days or so in general population before one day I ended up getting arrested inside a jail, which a lot of people don't even know that's a thing.
Yeah, I didn't know that was possible. What is that?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
So inside a jail, they have jail. They have
There's
jail
another
inside
jail.
a jail.
Okay.
Yes.
So you went to double jail.
Yeah. I went to double jail, which is, they call it the alpha block, and that's kind of more along less the lines what you'd see in movies, what the cell looks like. You're behind a cell door. Inside of that cell door, you got 2 metal bunks and a toilet, and that's in a desk, and that is it. It's a what do you want, 6x10 room or something like that. It's very small, 6x8. The reason I got arrested in jail was I took a bunk without permission. I know it sounds petty, but in jail they don't play games.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of time for stuff that's like, you accidentally put your finger in a cop's mouth.
Yeah.
Took a bunk that wasn't yours. I don't know. When I see all this through the lens of like, what's God doing? I'm like, who the heck is getting in this much trouble for these kinds of things? So something's going on.
Again, looking back on it now, I see the work where God was at, but, there was a island guy in there. He was from Haiti, and this was during my time in general population. The 15 days I was in there running around like a maniac. He had his nose in the Bible every day. That's all he did. From the time he woke up to the time he went to bed, he just sat there against a wall and just read his Bible. And I went up to this guy 3 or 4 times a day, usually, with some sort of argument that I would use to, bash Christianity. I like to think I was good at it. I don't care what I said to him. He had an answer for everything. And he used to leave me scratching my head because I had never heard it before. I never heard somebody so eloquently just speak back a truth that I never quite understood. He had asked me, he says, "Do you want to know Jesus?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, I guess," and he had me wash my hands in the sink at the jail, and he said, "Just ask God into your life." And so I did. I repeated after him. I just asked God to come into my life, and
So like a little micro baptism.
Almost like a micro baptism, yeah, yeah. And and then I took that bottom bunk, and I ended up in that, 2-man cell, a disciplinary cell for that 30 plus days. And it was in that disciplinary cells where I really had some interesting encounters. You know, I was just defeated at that point. I did 7 days in complete isolation. If anyone's ever been in isolation, it's tough. It's really tough. So I did 7 days. I did 7 days completely alone. And I'm thinking, oh man, I'm done. I can't keep doing this. It's reality started to sink in at that point. Plus, I'd gone 30 days basically sober now.
Yeah, what was that process like for you coming off of, being a daily drug user?
I had gone so psychotic that I didn't really recognize the withdrawals any longer. Just had this interesting transition happen in my brain at that time where I just all of a sudden went to this ultimate depression where I didn't want to play anymore. I was done. And the Lord graciously put me in a cell with some kid. Couldn't tell you his name. But it was the first time somebody in jail was nice to me. But this kid, man, he's like, man, you look cold. You want a pair of socks? Please. I didn't have socks in there. You want a piece of paper and a pencil? You write? Yeah, man, please. So he was just like the first kind thing I'd experienced in a long time. Sounds weird, but I don't know. It was just a moment of softening in my heart. He left. Another guy comes in. Looking back now, I would call him a zealot. He was just one of those. I think he loved Jesus, but I think he loved the end times more. He was just one of those guys that just, he was just all about Armageddon is coming, and so he left me this Bible prophecy book.
So what I'm curious about is it's a hard pivot for you from like, I'm an atheist and I'm going to try to pull apart Christianity at every turn, to then giving your life to Jesus in a jail cell. Like,
well, I hadn't quite done that yet. So going back to like, I did the quote unquote that baptism as one would almost call it. Mm-hmm. I was trying to get what this guy possessed, knowledge. He was smart. Okay. He was smart. And I couldn't beat him in an argument, so I'm like, oh, I'll give this a shot too. And so the zealot guy comes in, again, like he's talking about this Jesus. He's having me read Revelations and the streets of gold and stuff. And it does sound pretty cool, man. Like it sounded cool. Mm-hmm. I wasn't against it. I just saw an opportunity to use it for my benefit on some way.
Interesting.
It wasn't until I got my third cellmate. He was a 2-time murderer. He had murdered one time to get into jail or prison, and then in prison he had to murder to defend himself. And they counted it as a second on him. So he was a 2-time murderer. He's covered from his top of his head all the way to his toes, covered in tattoos. 43 years he spent in prison. But this gentleman, man, he looked at that prophecy book I was reading. He said, "You're wasting your time with that." He said, "You want to know about God? I'll tell you about God." And this guy, Tim, when I say he had a testimony like you wouldn't believe, he was going to kill himself, and he said God arrested him one night, just stopped him from doing it, and just told him that he was an instrument to be used, his instrument, God's instrument, and that he would let him kill himself. However, he told him, "Read my word." And so that night he didn't kill himself. He had a razor blade and everything. And he just said he just opened up the Bible and started reading. He said that his anxiety went away. He said the second he would look up from the page, his anxiety would come back. So he looked back into the Bible. And he read the Bible for like 20-something years straight. I mean, just the rest of his time in prison. And he ended up having a whole transformation of life. He started doing ministry in there. He was serving on the, their whatever in-house, chaplain stuff that they do in jail. And he was a man of God. I'll tell you that. You would never know it looking at him, but man, that guy told me his testimony, and I remember him leaving, and I just said these words. I said, "Jesus, if you're real, I want to know you." And it wasn't 24 hours later, I had another cellmate come in, strange guy, grew up Catholic, stepped away from the church, And so he ended up in my cell for stealing in jail. And so he's underneath my bunk, and he gives me a Bible. I said, "What's this?" He says, "I don't know. Somebody told me you needed it." So, okay. And then he goes on to say, I think you're supposed to start in the book of John. So how do you know that? I don't know. I just heard it somewhere. Okay. And Tim, it was like the 7th or 8th chapter into John. It was nighttime. I had given my life to Jesus at that point. I remember I closed the book, and I said, this is what I want. And that was the first time I ever heard God's voice. He said, take a look around. How good of a job have you done following yourself? And I'm sitting in a jail cell. My response obviously was not very good, right? And then he said, "Come follow me, and I'll show you a life you could never dream nor imagine."
So you hear the voice of God, and now is it like an audible voice, like something you're hearing in your spirit? Like,
I heard it in my spirit, but it was as if it was audible. I mean, no one else in the room would have heard it, but it was that clear.
So you spent the first 23 years of your life like confident there's no God, there's nothing to this. Life's about kind of partying and get as much as you can out of it before you die. And then you're hearing the voice of God. Like, what is that like for your worldview, like your understanding of reality?
It was the biggest weight I'd ever felt lifted off me. Ever.
I got to tell you, man, that sounds pretty good. You know, I mean,
it was amazing.
I can think of so many people in my life, and in a lot of ways, me too, where it's like, man, what would it be like to have that experience of the weight lifted? But I mean, we have access to that hope through Christ, right? But man, so many people I can think of where I'm like, gosh, just walk around with like a 1,000-pound weight on their shoulders, and not because they're doing CrossFit.
Yeah. I'm used to weight too, and I can tell you that was the most interesting sensation to this day I've ever felt. Was just this burden being taken, and I remember thinking to myself, reading the scriptures, if I was going to follow Jesus, I was going to do it fully.
So, dude, this is the interesting thing about like when I encounter people who have been in prison or who've been drug addicts and stuff like that, who've come to faith. They have this like ability to just go 100% in, because you went 100% in on the party life, like you went 100% in on drugs, and so you know what it's like to give your life over to something completely, in a way that, you know, I grew up in like suburbia, like my dad was a cop growing up, and I grew up going to church and stuff like that. So there was always this kind of sense of balance, of like everything has a balance, and in a lot of regards, I find myself envious of someone whose story is just like from one extreme to another, because it's so clear. You
got to remember, kind of in that phase of atheism or active atheism, I was utilizing the that kind of like that scandal that was happening in the Catholic Church at that time, if you remember, and so I made the decision then and there that I was never going to be that, that if I was going to follow Jesus, I was not going to give anybody an opportunity to find me not following him in some area.
So you have this experience in jail, but you're still in jail.
I was liberated and set free in that cell. I say this kind of candidly or jokingly. I'm in there for 30 days, 36 days, or whatever it was. The first half of it was the worst time of my life, and the last half was the best, because I had nothing to do but to sit with God. And it was the most amazing experience I ever had in my life.
Some people will like spend money to go on a spiritual retreat or whatever, so they can get 5 days away with just them and the Lord.
No, try an isolation cell. I'll tell them how to
that'll
get
the job done for sure.
Yeah, it's not hard. Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned that you're in there for 30-something days. How does that time conclude?
Man, I get out, and I wasn't allowed back in the first jail I was in, up in Plantation Key, which was close to my home, because when I got that arrest in jail, I'd also, I had ticked off a few people along the way, so they thought it better that I just stayed down there for a while. So I spent 4 months in Key West jail, and I went through 3 or 4 different dorms in jail, and I don't know how quite to explain this other than like I almost experienced a redo of my adolescent phase. I was real boyish. I was kiddish. I was, acting like we used to slap each other at the towels, and just, I don't know, it's just a weird experience. All along the journey, I was reading my Bible. I was kind of learning Jesus, but it's almost like God had the grace and the knowledge to give me this sort of like restart. And I had a lot of opportunities to almost have a repeat and decisions that I made in my life that didn't go so well. And, I got story after story about, my first car in high school was a Mazda Miata. My first car at a jail was a Mazda Miata. And it was a gift from a pastor.
Okay, hold on. Fill in the gap for us there. So you got it. You finish your time. You get out of jail. Now there's a pastor giving you a car.
Yeah, right. So I get out of jail. I finished my time in jail, and I felt the Lord taught me a lot in that time. So I leave jail well, if that makes sense. I left there well. My parents at that point knew I was. They had conversations with me all the way up until this point, and they finally were like, okay, he's ready. Got me a lawyer, got me out. That alone is its own story, just how everything played out. But I ended up getting out with getting all of my charges dropped to misdemeanors.
So no felonies on your record then?
Nothing got stuck. Nope.
So I've seen this happen over and over and over again with in people's lives when they first come to Jesus, is like there's an explosion of grace. Like things start lining up, things work out in their favor, like issues resolve, and it doesn't always happen that way. But I do find that in general, like the early stages of walking with the Lord are full of like God's generosity. And then once we have that as a foundation, then sometimes things get harder and God starts developing our character in that regard. But It does seem like by and large, the early stages of faith are defined by the deep abiding presence of God, a strong sense of God's presence and generosity. And it sounds like that was kind of your experience there too.
Had I not done that little stint in jail, I'd be dead. I am so certain of it. As a matter of fact, people that I was hanging out with before, they've OD'd. They're no longer with us. And so that alone tells me that I wasn't far from that journey.
Yeah. So how did you end up with a pastor who wants to give you a car? So
I come out of jail, and I am like on fire at this point. Okay. Yeah. I had been meditating and reading, and I am looking for Acts chapter 2, right? I'm looking for this group of believers that are just doing life together, experiencing miracles, and the Lord is just adding to their numbers daily. And so I'm like 4 or 5 churches in looking for what I was reading. And I came across this little tiny church. You would probably file them in the Pentecostal category, so coming from somebody who's never been to church to now finding this little tiny church, where the first day, man, the pastor's wife came out, she prayed with me, just sat next to me, just hugged me. They all took me out to lunch that day. I said, this is much closer to what I was reading, So the pastor, his name is Pastor Marlon Simon. He baptized me. He was he still is just a wonderful man. And my uncle, while I was in jail, paid off that Ford Fiesta that I never made a payment on. Well, when I got out, naturally, I thought that was still my car. I got the title with my name on it, keys in my hand. This is my car. And he felt different.
Okay.
He said, no, I'm selling that car, and if I sell it for anything more than what I paid it off for, then you can have the remaining balance. But, I was there to help your credit and not buy your car for you.
Yeah.
And we had an argument. He took the front tire off my car so I couldn't drive it, even took the lug nuts. And so I went to that pastor. He says, Joe, let the car go. He just said, let the car go. I said, okay. I went back to my uncle. I said, here's the car, here's the title. We shook hands, we hugged, and Marlon took me to his backyard. He lifted up a car cover and he said, I've had this Mazda Miata in my backyard for 5 years, and we're waiting for the title. And I just got word that the title's in the mail now. When it gets here, it's yours. Pay me $1,200 for the car, which is ironically the same exact dollar amount that I got my first Miata was supposed to pay, but I never did.
So a chance to do it all over again.
Chance to do it all over again, Tim. And I did. I paid him back all the way through. I remember Easter morning. I made my final payment on him. I was so happy, and I took good care of that little old car, man. And Marlon, Pastor Marlon, was the one who actually introduced me to Blue Water in the Keys, which is the current church that I'm pastoring now. And he said, okay, Joe, there's a group of younger adults that meet on Sunday nights. And it was that night, I remember standing over the coffee table, and the pastor who started the church, Phil Underwood, walks up to the coffee table at the same time, and we shook hands. And that was the second time I heard the Lord's voice, was that time. And he said, follow this man and you'll become wise. There wasn't any instructions. There wasn't nothing. It was just follow this man and become wise. So inside the bulletin, it said, need help cleaning gutters. Any volunteers, inside the bulletin. So at the time I had access to a ladder, found a ladder, borrowed a truck because I couldn't fit in the Miata, drove that ladder to the church, and I went up and I cleaned that gutters. And I got his attention. And it wasn't 3 weeks later, I think I was the maintenance overseer of the whole church, super small mom and pop church. We had probably 40 people at the time.
Like, I'm listening to your story, and I'm just like, it makes me think of a couple years ago, my family took a road trip. We drove from California to Minnesota and back. And we made a map, right? And like we had our stops, like our places we were going, and in order to get to the next place, it required us to get to the place before that. And that's what it feels like listening to your story. Like, God's taking you on a journey that has a clear destination, and there's all these stops along the way, right? Where like he knew you needed to lose your job in California. He knew you needed to find yourself in the off season in Florida. He knew you needed to end up in that jail cell. Like all these little, and then to connect with this pastor who's going to give you a car, to connect with this church that's going to treat you like a normal human being, even though.
Yeah, right. A lot of the times we don't see the events that he's orchestrating ahead of time, but if we just settle in the reality that he's got this, then I can rest and know that it's all going to work out.
And so at this point, where the journey's brought you is to this church with this pastor, and you hear the Spirit of God say, hey, follow this guy. He's going to teach you how to become a godly man.
I mean, mind you, Blue Water as the church itself did not start until 2013. Phil came down to take over or to begin pastoring what was called Life Point. It was a Life Point church. And when he fully committed, came down, got his housing all aligned, they pulled the plug. Life Point did. And so he had no choice but to either leave or to start a church. And so he started Blue Water. And so he felt the call of God on his life, and he mentored a small group of us. There was a group of young adults who were all still really close and good friends. But he took the time and just, totally Jesus dust. He had about 6 of us just following in his footsteps, man, just learning and growing. And we met often. We did an online school of ministry, which was fantastic. We met once a week and listened to countless lectures and learned a lot and grew a lot. And it was such a fun time. Because here's the thing, Tim, is like I didn't know anything about church. Coming from being an atheist, I didn't know what a benediction was. I didn't know, how a service flow was. I didn't know.
What a unique experience for you, man. Like, and now you being in full-time ministry too, just to have, a lot of people I know who are in ministry grew up in the church, or they grew up, in that world, and maybe their dad's a pastor or whatever. But for you, it was mid-20s, you're stepping in cold.
So I had to learn all these things Yeah, and so I'm so thankful for it because come 2022 December, after those two big hits, Irma and COVID, financially it didn't make sense. Phil Underwood to continue to try to pastor and allow the church to grow at the same time. It was like something had to change. And so he offered Alexis and I the opportunity to become the pastors of Blue Water.
Okay, now hold on. You just mentioned a name we haven't heard yet. Who is Alexis?
Alexis is my wife.
Okay, so
Alexis
and
is my wife.
all of that comes after prison or after jail?
Yeah. So I met Alexis. She actually walked into Blue Water early part of 2018. She had a grandmother with Alzheimer's who loved going to the Catholic Church. Her Alzheimer's got so bad, Grandma didn't really know what church she was in, so Alexis started to go check out some different churches. And she walked into Blue Water, and I happened to be giving the message that day, and she came up to the front, asked for prayer for her grandmother. I prayed for her. You would think it was love at first sight. I mean, she's beautiful, my wife, but it wasn't. It was, at the time I was very focused on me and growing personally with the Lord. But Tim, she just kept coming every Sunday. She was so dependable. It's 3 months in, she's serving on the team. She's helping with, getting the food out and setting things up, to all of a sudden she started greeting people and just getting plugged into the leadership side of things. And she ended up asking me out, and she'll admit to that too.
I'll have to have her on the show. She can tell us the whole story.
If you see her, most people will be like, yeah, right. But it's true.
Well, but what you said earlier about, hearing the voice of the Lord in your jail cell, where he's like, hey, like, follow me and I'll show you a life you could not have imagined.
Yeah. So Phil took a small group of us, 10 of us, to South Africa. On that trip, I'm standing on top of a mountain. I think it's called Table Mountain in South Africa. And those words that the Lord spoke to me came back. I'm standing on top of a mountain in South Africa, and I just heard him say, I told you I'd show you a life you could never dream or imagine.
Dude. That's so good.
Dude, taking a drug addict, and taking him to a place that I never could have made it there on my own.
Right.
I couldn't afford that trip. I couldn't have done anything, but the Lord just did it, and that was before I met my wife. About a year after that, we had our first kid, Bryce, and that was a big wake up from me. As soon as that kid came out, man, I grabbed him and I knew what to do.
Isn't that crazy?
It's just dude, it's so cool, and since then we have had a second kid. So
now you're clean and sober, you're out of jail, you're working with the church, so all of that, and then in addition you got your wife, 2 kids, and it sounds like you're being offered the leadership role in the church that you're in. So Phil actually in 2022 he offered Alexis and I the pastor opportunity, and he had offered it 3 times leading up to that. Somewhere in 2017 he said, I really want you to consider doing this. I said, no, I'm good, I don't want to do it. In 2019 2020 range, he had brought 3 of us up and said, how about this, Joe? It'd be you and these 2 others that you guys will co-pastor together, and it'd be a team effort. And both of them dropped out. They said, no, we don't want to do it. So I said, if they're not doing it, I'm not doing it. So this time, when he asked me, I had Alexis, and we both said yeah. And so they left in 2023, May, I think. So May will be 3 years Alexis and I have been lead pastors of Blue Water. And I tell you, man, it has been awesome. It has got its moments. I have got my phone ringing 24 hours a day. I mean, you wouldn't believe the conversations I get to have. Well, man, I think about like if I grew up pretty straight and narrow, didn't use drugs, I'm a sinner saved by grace, right? But like I didn't go out of my way to, live a wild life at any particular point. so I think about like myself, if I were placed in your context where you've got a lot of transient people, you've got a lot of people looking to party, you've got a lot of people down there who are trying to escape a past of some kind or whatever, I would probably not excel in that environment. But it just feels to me like God knew Blue Water needed a pastor who was going to be able to minister to that type of person. And so he sees you, this atheist kid in Riverside using drugs, and he's like, that's my guy. Like, and he takes you on this journey, dude. Yeah. Isn't that crazy? I don't know. Like, because now I'm guessing like the type of people that you get to minister to are sometimes people not totally different from who you were.
I'm talking to myself most of the day.
Yeah. But man, you're doing it in a way that like no one else could. And that's one of the things that being part of the Activated team, like I've become really aware of just how uniquely God has wired churches, pastors, ministry leaders, like for the specific it's like when scripture says like for a time such as this, right? Like that God has placed us there and taken us on the journey that he's taken us on so that we can be present in the places that he calls us to.
Since I've been pastoring, it's been 3 years. And it wasn't until that week with you guys, hanging out at that retreat with fellow pastors, the level of confirmation that I had after that short time together, I cannot express how thankful I am for that. Because coming from my background, I would have this constant thought of, I'm not to the level of a real pastor. I'm not I didn't go to school for this. I didn't, I don't have the education or the background or the history or the experience that a lot of these other pastors have, but listening and conversing and talking and seeing that, wow, we really have the same level of struggles, and I was the level and depth of engagement and conversation I was able to have with anybody in that room. It said the encouragement was so great, and it just gave me the little just pat on the shoulder from the Lord, just saying like, I put you here.
That actually brings up a question that I meant to ask this at the very beginning of our recording, but you're connected with the Activated team. How did you get involved?
So during the transition process of Alexis and I taking over Blue Water, I'm assuming it was Phil, my former pastor, had made known to Kirk that we were taking over the church.
It's always Kirk.
Yeah, right.
His name comes up in like every episode.
I received an email from Kirk congratulating on Alexis and I's transition, and that he was a coach for pastors, and that for no fee, he would sit down with us and coach us, and he'd be happy to do so. And during that coaching session, he explained to me how everything kind of worked with the Activated team and him, and how what he does is a gift to pastors, for pastors, and he loves it. It's from his heart. To where Alexis and I, we got to know him and grow with him, and he's walked me through some stuff. Help me walk through some stuff.
Yeah.
And, stuff that you cannot prepare for.
Yeah, man. I'm so encouraged by the journey that you've been on, and just the way that you have approached it, and the way that God's been faithful. And so, I mean, that brings me really to kind of the last couple questions that I try to ask everybody that we have on the show. The first is ministry still worth it for you? Absolutely, yes. And it has grown on me in ways that I never thought possible. I always looked at myself, and we're big on the, kind of the fivefold ministry, the apostles,
Ephesians
prophets.
4.
Yeah. And so I'd always kind of settled in the camp of evangelist, teacher. And so I just assumed I could just, small group and tell people about Jesus, and I was going to be totally where I needed to be in ministry, not knowing that God had this pastoral calling on my life. And because I was always harsh. I was just a truth teller. I'll tell you how it is, and I don't care if it hurts, And
man, that's so not how I've encountered you, though. Like you.
Well, that is a grace of God.
Well, we spent a week together at a retreat that Activated put on a couple weeks ago, and man, I immediately was drawn to you and enjoyed connecting with you. And I remember coming home and telling my wife, like, man, I met this guy named Joe. He's just like the easiest guy to talk to. Like, he's such a good listener.
It's been a God-given grace to become an advocate for people. And so I just want to stand with people. So yeah, is ministry worth it to me? Yeah, because I get to stand with people and walk with them on their journey.
So my last question for you, Joe, is the question that I really love asking everybody that we have on here, and that's, is Jesus still good news to you?
Yeah, there isn't a day that goes by that I don't, kind of how we introduce this conversation, that I don't just stop for a second and thank him.
Yeah.
You know, I've got blessings stacked on top of blessings, stacked on top of blessings. And it is very easy for me to want to assume that I earn these things by the trials and the effort and the hard work. And it's easy for us to just, take credit. And I just intentionally pause and thank him and remember that it's all from him. It all started when I met him in that cell. I mean, it started for God a lot sooner than that, but for me, it started when I met him in jail. And I just thank him for how far he's taken me. And I just cannot express how much I'm looking forward to where it's going. Yeah. And I love, before we leave, I just want to say, I love how Kirk says this in our ministry thing. You know, when bad things happen, it's just Jesus making a Christian out of us. And we just get to learn, man. And it's so cool.
Joe, I love it, man. Thank you so much. Hey, before we close out, would you just be willing to say a brief prayer for the people who are listening, especially anybody who might be encountering a similar scenario or know someone who's in a similar scenario, and just that God would give them hope and confidence?
Yep. So, Father, we just want to bring you to this place right now, Lord, and ask you, Lord, that if there's somebody in tune right now, somebody hearing, somebody grabbing a sense of hope just from the conversation and the life change that you made in myself, Lord, that you just have the ability right now, Lord, to just reach into that heart and just speak life, Father, because your words are life. And Lord, I ask you just continue to move in a way that we can never think, dream, nor imagine. Show us how much we are loved. Open our eyes to your goodness. And Lord, I ask your grace just be poured out on us right now as we continue to recognize where our blessings come from. We thank you, Father. Amen.
Amen. Joe, man, this was a real privilege to have you on the show. There's so much more we could have talked about here too. We could have talked about,
oh yeah,
I mean, we could do a whole episode on CrossFit and how that's worked into kind of your ministry and how you use that as a springboard for engaging people. But thanks for sharing it with us. It's been a real privilege to hear it. That's going to be it for us today on Grace and the Gravity, where pastors you don't know from churches you don't attend tell true stories of good news from right here on planet Earth. We will catch you guys next time.